Emma Clark stood silently by the ancient oak tree overlooking the peaceful village of Cotswolds. Her heart felt heavier than the grey clouds above. Only days ago, her husband Daniel had passed away, leaving behind a silence that echoed through their quaint home. The lawyer's words still rang in her ears. Daniel's entire estate was left to his ex-wife's family. Not a single penny for Emma. Shock and disbelief tangled with the ache of loss inside her. How could Daniel, the man she loved for 10 years, do this to her? Emma clenched her fists. The old stone church bell tolled in the distance, marking the hour. She knew she had to face the truth, no matter how painful. The village whispered quietly around her. Friends avoided her gaze. The warmth of their shared memories now seemed cold and distant. Emma felt alone. Emma returned to their cottage, the familiar creak of the wooden door greeting her like a ghost from the past. The house was silent now, void of Daniel's laughter or the small daily noises that once filled the rooms with warmth. She walked through the living room, touching a photograph of them smiling on their last holiday in Cornwall. A tear traced down her cheek. The will was clear. Everything left to the family of Daniel's ex-wife, Claire. Emma could hardly comprehend the legal terms, but the cold fact remained. Determined to find answers, Emma sifted through Daniel's belongings. Among old letters and bills, she discovered a small, worn notebook hidden beneath the floorboard in the study. Its leather cover was cracked and faded. Inside, pages were filled with Daniel's neat handwriting. She began reading. The notebook told a story Emma had never heard. Years before they met, Daniel had been caught in a complicated situation involving Claire's family, debts, threats, and promises made to protect someone dear to him. The notes revealed Daniel's secret sacrifices, burdens he carried alone. Emma's mind raced. Had Daniel's decision to leave everything to Claire's family been part of some hidden agreement? A debt he never wanted her to know about? As she turned the pages, Emma found a letter addressed to her, written in Daniel's familiar script. Emma, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. There are things I could never explain while I lived. Please forgive the silence. Know that every choice I made was to protect you and those I love. Trust that one day, the truth will find its way. Emma's heart pounded. The grief was mixed now with confusion and a spark of hope. What had Daniel hidden? And what truth was waiting to be uncovered? The next morning dawned cold and misty over Cotswolds. Emma sat at the kitchen table, the letter in her trembling hands. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, doubts, and a fragile hope. She knew she had to learn more about Daniel's past, about Claire's family and the secret burdens he carried. Yet, every attempt to ask the villagers was met with cautious silence or quick changes of subject. It was as if Daniel's life before her was a locked door no one dared to open. Emma's phone buzzed. A message from Claire's younger brother, Henry. Can we meet? There are things you should know about Daniel. Emma hesitated but agreed. They arranged to meet at a small cafe in nearby Stroud. When Emma arrived, Henry was already waiting, his face worn and tired. I'm sorry for how things have been, he said softly. Daniel was a good man, but there were things he couldn't tell anyone. Our family, we had troubles. Old debts, dangerous people. Daniel stepped in to help protect us. Emma listened, heart aching. Henry explained that Daniel had signed papers to take responsibility for a large loan their family owed, a loan that if unpaid, could ruin them all. Daniel didn't want you involved, Henry said. He thought if he kept it hidden, it would spare you pain. Emma felt anger flare up, but also a deep sadness. Daniel had carried this secret alone, shielding her from the worst. But why leave everything to Claire's family? Emma asked. Henry looked away. Because Daniel believed the debt was theirs to repay. He wanted to make sure they were taken care of if anything happened to him. Emma's thoughts raced. She felt betrayed but understood the weight on Daniel's shoulders. That evening, Emma returned home, the walls closing in around her. She sat by the fireplace, the notebook open on her lap. The entries grew darker, filled with worry and fear for what might come. Her tears fell silently. The man she loved had battled demons in silence, sacrificing everything for those he once knew. And now, Emma was left to piece together a life shattered by secrets. But somewhere deep inside, a new resolve began to form. She would find a way to uncover the full truth. Days passed, but Emma's resolve only grew stronger. She spent her mornings going through Daniel's old contacts, trying to piece together the fragmented puzzle of his secret life. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became that Daniel had lived a double life, one that Emma barely understood. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the cottage windows, a knock came at the door. Emma opened it to find a tall man in a dark coat. His eyes held a weary seriousness. "Are you Emma Clark?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "Who are you?" Emma replied, cautious. "My name is Detective Mark Bennett. I knew Daniel. There are things you need to know, things about his past that might help explain everything." Emma hesitated but invited him in. Over tea, Mark told her about a long-standing feud between Daniel and a dangerous loan shark who had targeted Claire's family years ago. Daniel had taken the brunt of threats and intimidation to protect the family, often paying off debts from his own money. "But why keep this from you?" Emma asked. Mark sighed. "Daniel was a proud man. He wanted to shield you from danger and shame. He believed his past mistakes should never taint your life." Emma felt a mix of admiration and sorrow. The man she thought she knew was far more complex than she imagined. As Mark spoke, Emma's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Claire. "I want to meet. There is something you should see." Curiosity and caution battled within Emma, but she agreed. The next day, she met Claire at an old estate house on the outskirts of Cotswolds. Claire handed Emma an envelope thick with documents and photographs. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she realized the extent of Daniel's sacrifices. There were letters of repayment, proof of threats, and a final note from Daniel himself. "To Emma, my love. Protect her, always." Emma's world shifted. The bitterness she had felt softened into a complicated blend of grief, understanding, and a fierce determination to honor Daniel's legacy. Emma sat in the quiet of her living room, the envelope from Claire resting on the table before her. The weight of Daniel's secrets pressed down like a storm about to break. She felt the urge to confront the shadows that had haunted her marriage and now threatened her future. Days later, Emma visited the local solicitor's office, determined to understand the legal complexities of Daniel's will. The solicitor, a kind woman named Margaret, explained that despite the will, Emma had some rights as his widow. There were loopholes and possibilities Emma had never known. Hope stirred within her, but the path ahead was steep and uncertain. Returning home, Emma's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Henry again, this time with a cautious smile. "There's more," he said. "Daniel left instructions hidden in his old family home. Something he wanted you to find one day." Emma's heart quickened. They drove together to the sprawling estate on the edge of the village. Dusty rooms and faded portraits whispered of a time long past. In the library, beneath a loose floorboard, Emma discovered a locked box. With trembling hands, she opened it to reveal letters, photographs, and a journal belonging to Daniel's mother. The pages told of a family burdened by secrets and sacrifices, a legacy Daniel had fought to protect. Among the letters was a note addressed to Emma, written in Daniel's mother's delicate hand. "Dear Emma, you are more important to Daniel than anyone knew. He hoped this would help you understand him, and forgive." Emma's eyes blurred with tears. The man she loved had left her not just pain, but a chance to heal. As she left the estate, Emma felt a flicker of strength ignite within her. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, she believed she might find peace. Emma returned home with the box of memories weighing heavily in her arms and her heart. Each letter, each photograph, and every page of the journal painted a portrait of a man burdened not just by debt but by love, loyalty, and sacrifice. She spent long nights reading Daniel's mother's words. The journal revealed family struggles, debts piled high after a failed business, threats from those who demanded repayment, and Daniel's relentless efforts to shield everyone he cared about. The final pages held a letter from Daniel himself, a letter he never sent. My dearest Emma. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. Please understand, everything I did was to protect you, even if it meant hiding the truth. I trusted you more than anyone and hoped that one day, you would see the depth of my love through these words. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. The bitterness and anger that had once consumed her slowly began to dissolve into a bittersweet understanding. Daniel's love had been his armor, his secret shield against a world that threatened to tear them apart. The next morning, Emma made a decision. She would not let Daniel's sacrifices be in vain. She would fight to reclaim her future and honor the man who had loved her so deeply, despite the shadows that surrounded them. Her first step was to meet with the solicitor Margaret again, armed with the new evidence. There was hope now, not just for justice but for a new beginning. As she stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds over the rolling hills of the Cotswolds. For the first time in months, Emma felt a quiet peace settling over her soul. The courtroom stood like a cathedral of judgment, cold, imposing, and indifferent. Emma sat alone on the polished bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across from her, Claire's family occupied the front row with an air of quiet confidence, as though victory had already been written in their favor. But Emma was no longer the grieving widow swallowed by confusion. She had found her voice. She had found the truth. Margaret, her solicitor, rose with poise and confidence. She addressed the court with calm precision, laying out the inconsistencies in Daniel's will. The timing of the new will, the lack of legal witnesses, and the absence of Emma's name were all red flags. Your Honor, Margaret said, this revised testament lacks the legitimacy required under law. My client, as Daniel Clark's lawful wife, was not only omitted without clear reason, but the will itself appears to have been manipulated. The judge frowned. Claire's solicitor objected, but the judge allowed Margaret to continue. Then came the turning point. Margaret placed a set of documents on the bench. They included Daniel's handwritten letters, copies of loan payments made in secret, and the heartfelt note he left for Emma, alongside a forensic handwriting analysis proving the will had been forged. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Emma looked over at Claire. Her expression, once calm and cold, cracked with panic. Daniel would never cut her out, Margaret concluded. He was a man who protected those he loved, even to his last breath. What we see here is not the reflection of his wishes, but the ambition of those who sought to take advantage of his death. Silence filled the room. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully, adjusting his glasses, the room heavy with anticipation. I will take time to review this in full, he said. But based on the evidence presented today, a full investigation into the authenticity of the will is warranted. Until then, all financial distributions are to be frozen. Emma exhaled, barely realizing she had been holding her breath. As the crowd began to disperse, Claire approached her. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You've made your point, Emma. But this isn't over. Emma looked at her, not with hatred, but with the quiet power of someone who had endured and survived. No, she replied. But I'm just getting started. Weeks passed, and the investigation into Daniel's forged will began in earnest. Emma remained patient, anchored by something she hadn't felt in months, purpose. One morning, as frost still clung to the windows of her cottage, a letter arrived by post. It bore the seal of the court. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The ruling was clear, The revised will had been declared invalid due to undeniable evidence of forgery. The court recognized Emma as Daniel's rightful heir. All assets, his estate, remaining funds, and pension, were restored to her. Emma sat down slowly, staring at the letter. The silence around her was broken only by the ticking of the old mantel clock. And then, at last, the tears came, not from pain, but release. Her first act was not to spend the money, but to restore the old local library Daniel had loved as a boy. She created a fund in his name to support education for underprivileged youth in Gloucestershire. Henry, who had remained by her side throughout, stood beside her on the day of the library's reopening. "You've done more than win a legal battle," he said. "You've reclaimed his memory." Emma looked around the room filled with children laughing, shelves brimming with books, and sunlight pouring through tall windows. She nodded. "I thought he left me with nothing," she said quietly. "But he gave me the strength to start again." In the months that followed, Emma continued to live in the cottage, planting a new garden in the spring, hosting reading groups, and writing a memoir of her journey, not just for herself, but for others who had ever felt forgotten, betrayed, or broken. And every Sunday, she visited Daniel's grave with fresh wildflowers. Not out of grief, but with gratitude. One afternoon, as she stood by the headstone, she whispered the words that had once echoed in sorrow, now filled with peace. "You thought you were protecting me from the truth. But the truth is what set me free."